Europe kind of co-opted a lot of scholarship coming from the Arab world. The Islamic bathing practices, decimal number system, and they went, we may not like these people, but this is blatantly good. When you have shared struggle and shared poverty with other groups of people, it does create a genuine, like, those are my people. Yeah. I never grew up believing that middle-class white people had ownership over everything that was good. You think about the absurdity of excluding Indian troops from the victory parade after World War II. India contributed more men and resources than New Zealand, Canada, and Australia combined to the British war effort. And the British government goes, yeah, but do we really want to show the world that brown people helped us win this war? Yeah, no.
Welcome everybody. I'm very, very excited to do this. My name is Mikey Mhenna. This is a live episode of Afikra Quartertones. If you don't know about Afikra Quartertones, it is a podcast that is trying to explore the sound of the Arab world, what it did sound like, what it does sound like, what it might sound like in the future. And we do that by speaking to people who influence this region, regardless of where they come from and where they might be going. Akala is a giant in this world. He's a thought leader. He is a writer. But more than anything, he is a music head and a rapper and a musician. It is an honor. Please give it up for Akala, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
So one of the things I think you do at sort of at the core of your music and your work is connecting with a diverse set of audiences.
Yeah.
Both as listeners, but also as people who are informing your work and like influencing the way you think about the world. So I want to go back to sort of 2005, 2006, 2007, early career, early Akala.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
How were you doing that? You were living in the UK. How are you actually getting diverse voices and connecting with diverse audiences?
Well, I think London, partly as a consequence of the British Empire, one of the ironic effects is that London has the world in it. I mean, the borough I grew up in, a borough called Camden, there's 130 languages spoken in my borough. In my school, there were people, and what's interesting is none of the teachers in my school ever explained why we had children from Sudan and Somalia and Iraq and Kurdistan and St. Lucia and all of these places where British imperialism had been involved. Not that that's the sole reason for migration, but it was often a huge part of the reason. Big Irish population in my neighborhood. And so it's only actually as I got older and traveled more of the world to more culturally and even different parts of England, actually, culturally and ethnically homogenous, for want of a better word, places, that I realized my experience was the unusual one. And having genuine friends whose mum and dad come from Pakistan, another friend who comes from India, and another friend who comes from Turkey. And ironically, because it's London, we still all communicated through this mix of American hip hop, UK garage. Like there was a shared popular culture among young Londoners that was its own thing, separate from all of our own. You know, whether you grew up listening to Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan or Dennis Brown, right? It was, and so that was just my normality. But it also meant I was learning, whether I realized it or not, till I got a little bit older, about other cultures, other struggles. My neighbors were from Cyprus. They came to Britain after the war in Cyprus in the 70s. And I learned about that by osmosis. I grew up eating vine leaves and halloumi and
souvlaki.
Just as a normal, right? Just as a normal that par for the course. If you're a Londoner, whatever your ethnicity, you're going to know some Indian food for sure. Yeah. And you don't realize you're learning culture through all of those things till you go to places where those things are not available and you go, oh, you guys... Like, even though I'm Jamaican, you guys don't have Indian food? Like, if I go somewhere where there's no Indian food, for example, I'm like, there's like Indian food everywhere in London. And I didn't realize how much I valued that experience. But I do think that, when done well, creates a genuine empathy for other cultures. We're naturally all biased towards our own family, our own group, our own tribe. But if you actually grow up, especially, fairly working class background, to put it mildly, when you have shared struggle and shared, to be honest, poverty with other groups of people, it does create a genuine, like, those are my people. Yeah. Even though they're not my people, they're my people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So in those days, did you feel like you were speaking to these different groups, or you were speaking on behalf of these different groups?
I think two more than on behalf. I think everybody speaks on behalf of themselves, but I felt that even though I went to a special Pan-African Saturday school, I grew up with this sort of Pan-African nationalist, but nonetheless left-wing internationalist politics.
Yeah.
That was also part of it. My parents, despite having, both of them had really, really awful upbringings, to be quite frank, and yet they were both just very brainy, very bright, they didn't let their childhoods crush them, even though they both had the kinds of childhoods that should crush most normal human beings. And they were very politically conscious people.
Yeah.
The family that basically adopted my mother. So my mother was kicked out of the house when she got my dad. This is the 1980s. It was a very common experience for white women in the UK who fell in love with black guys. Dad wasn't too happy about it, and in my mum's case, that was very much the case. But the family that basically adopted her was a family of Guyanese, Jamaican university graduates. So my godfather, my Uncle Hoffman, his dad, even though they were working class in England, back in Guyana, he'd been a school teacher, but he'd gone to university. He was very active in the trade unions back in Guyana. He'd been close to governmental power back in Guyana. And so he brought, ironically, my mother, who is white, was educated by this Caribbean immigrant family who in many respects were more cultured and more worldly. I mean, she did a degree in Caribbean history partly as a consequence of this, and only in her 20s. And so I felt that I was speaking to this multicultural, multi-ethnic, working class London experience, but also to many people that came from former British colonies and by extension other formerly colonized parts of the world. Because there is a shared experience in that way. Again, I think I'm a little bit younger, but growing up on the tail end of the non-aligned movement and South-South solidarity and all of that sort of stuff, there was very much a sense in black nationalist politics. I don't know why I'm saying that in inverted commas, but that it wasn't black nationalism was an inverse of white nationalism. It wasn't about black people are better than everyone else. It was about getting free from slavery and colonialism and apartheid in solidarity with other people who'd suffered similar things, rather than, my group is better than yours, my tribe is better than yours kind of vibe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I want to come back to the South-South stuff, but I want to stay back in 2006 for a second.
Yeah.
So a lot of people's entry point into your work has somewhat to do with Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's true.
Was your interest in Shakespeare at all ironic? Were you sort of trying to reclaim this thing, or say, I have some sort of ownership over this playwright and this work, and there's a place for me here? Or I guess maybe the easier version of this question is, what was your relationship like to that work?
So I think a couple of things. I think sometimes critics of Western imperialism can overspill into rejecting everything.
Yeah, the baby in bathwater type.
And it's just silly. Every culture has their Shakespeare, their Rumi, their Gabriel Garcia Marquez, their Chekhov. Every culture has created beauty. If some people have become bigots based on the beauty that their culture has created, that's quite sad and it's unfortunate. That doesn't mean the achievements themselves are not real enough. So first of all, just the recognition that blatantly in the English language, Shakespeare's one of the best people to write in the English language. As a storyteller, as a creator of character, there's a reason why his work survived and none of the other playwrights of his era, many of whom were very good. Ben Jonson, Christopher Marlowe, these were all very brilliant people. They weren't Shakespeare. And they knew that in the time. Yes, fine, his work did spread because of British imperialism. There is a certain linguistic colonialism to be unpacked. There's all of that to go through. But even in his own time, in his own city, the rest of the mandem are like, yo, that's the guy. That's Nas. That's
Michael Jordan.
That's Michael Jordan in his own time, right? They knew what it was. So for me, because my stepdad was the stage manager of a theatre, fine, it was a working class, Caribbean-led theatre called Hackney Empire, like opposite the projects, the estate, right, in the ends. But I never grew up thinking theatre was theatre with an F for the Londoners in the house. All right, theatre.
Should we do a Google Translator? You guys good? You guys?
Right. So theatre. If I said theatre, this would be a class marker. You're supposed to speak like this. Theatre. Theatre. You're showing really who and what you are, right? But I never grew up believing that middle-class white people had ownership over everything that was good.
Yeah.
Like my parents were dogged, and my mom and dad, I didn't grow up with both of them. My dad to be fair to me, wasn't an absent father, but when my mum broke up, I would stay at his house weekends, holidays, etc. So it was present in my life. I just didn't live with him. And even ironically, and for those who read my book will notice, like my uncles who were, there's another way of putting it, gangsters and criminals, even they were like, you're going to do well in school. Because you're a bright youth, and if you don't do well in school, we're going to punch you up. Like there was, so and I went back to Jamaica as a kid for one summer. That's all it took. It was so blatantly obvious that none of my cousins had any idea that blackness was supposed to be related to not doing well in school. Yeah. The national spelling competition is televised in Jamaica. The national debate competition is televised. One of the most bizarre things about Jamaica is that for all its other problems, and there's a lot about Jamaica that's wrong, so I'm not romanticizing the country, but the top schools in the country are all state schools. The private schools are kind of looked at as the schools, no disrespect, the schools for not very bright rich kids.
When you got kicked out of the state school?
No, well, rich kids who couldn't even qualify to get into the state school.
Okay.
The top schools are a school called Campion College. There's a school called Calabar. Vibes Cartel, I don't know whether he did or didn't go to Calabar. But the point is, he says that he did, as a boast. Yeah. And other people say, nah, man, I'm just a lie, and he's trying to get street cred off of pretending he went to a better school than he did.
I did well in the spelling bee.
I'm not even joking. The first non-American to win the international spelling bee was a young Jamaican girl called Sally Ann Matthews. When she came back to Jamaica, there were people at the airport to greet her.
Amazing.
She got like a deal with the Jamaican equivalent to McVitie's. Like she got a sponsorship deal on a TV show.
She got a shoe deal
for winning this. Right. So all it took was one summer, and I came back to England. I thought, not just black kids. It's really sad that a lot of working class white kids in England think that being clever belongs to middle class people. Almost seeding all of this ground and performing. And anyone who works with working class boys in England will notice that it's almost like this performing intellectual deference to people who are supposed to be your betters, right? And I never felt any of that. So I never felt like I was someone who said theatre like this, had more innate ownership over Shakespeare. And then when I started looking into the history, I was like, well, in his own time, 92% of his audience were illiterate. It was the form of popular entertainment. It was very much one of the few places in London at that time where the hood was out and then the elites were at the top with lemons over their nose because people smelled quite bad. Washing wasn't too much of a thing in London in those days. And so then obviously once it became a public thing, there was the irony. But to be honest, the pushback that I thought would come from the custodians of Shakespeare in England, if I'm honest, it never really came. There was almost this thing of, this guy actually knows his stuff. Like, it's not a gimmick. He really has, because there's a few programs I was on. There's one that actually someone's cut up and put on YouTube, where I was on a program talking about Shakespeare, and I could see some of the Shakespearean scholars, you know, when they give you that look, he actually knows, this rapper actually knows what he's talking about. Yeah. Like, he's actually read the plays and the scholarship writing and
not just the hits, like the B-sides.
The B-sides and the classics and the Titus Andronicus and, you know, all the stuff. And so actually what I found was, people didn't want to challenge me in that space too badly because it would have got embarrassing for them. Yeah. Right? And then there were some really early champions, Ben and David Crystal, who are two of the most respected people looking at the language of Shakespeare, and just cool. They're just father and son authors. And once we kind of had the nod from them and a few other people, Cicely Berry, rest in peace, who was she was the voice coach at the Royal Shakespeare Company. But I mean, she was a personal friend of Paul Robeson as a younger woman. Do you know what I mean? Like, so this was the caricatures. In fact, I had to investigate my own bias and assumptions because the people that I thought these people would be, some of them were that, but lots of them were like, I grew up here. I didn't grow up with money either. I'm not from what you think I'm from. I just am now in this place, and you're as. Do you know what I mean? So it was something that I felt like more of us need to do. I went to New York recently, and I don't know why this relates, but it does relate for me, right? And for all America's problems, and there's much about America to be disgusted with, but what I notice sometimes in America, it's so normal to see black people in certain positions of power that I don't even think black Americans even notice it till they go elsewhere. I was in a museum in New York, I can't remember which one, and there was like an exhibition on Renaissance Florence, but the brother in charge of it was Mandem. Like, he was a black brother, but he was from round the way. You could, you know, when you just know. I'm sure he went to the right university and all of that, but he's from Brooklyn or somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, the fact that he felt that sense of intellectual entitlement to just go, I like pre-Raphaelite art, and who cares what everybody else thinks? What I find is when you go to the country of origin, people don't have the same hang-ups. Heavy metal is like the second most popular music in India. If Metallica go to India, it's shut down.
Yeah.
Like, because Indians in India don't think they need someone's permission to like what they like. Does anyone in here who's not Jamaican, so none of the Jamaicans in here can answer this. For anyone who's not of Jamaican origin in the house, who is the most popular non-Jamaican musician in Jamaica? Does anyone know? Absolutely, right. You're not of Jamaican origin, are you? Okay, cool, I'll let you
Is number 3 John Denver?
No.
No.
Is Celine Dion, like Kenny Rogers?
Oh, Kenny Rogers.
Michael Bolton?
Yeah, Kenny Rogers.
They don't care. They're like, we love all that corny shit. And not that Celine Dion's corny, because Celine's not corny. Let me be clear. But like, so the point is, I think that we need to be careful to round it off. Your original point, the sort of baby and bathwater thing, we can reject colonial imposition and still say, yeah, but there's beauty in this. And actually, there's something far more radical in going, I feel some ownership over Descartes or Bacon or Plato, and I have my own relationship with those scholars and those thinkers, that there doesn't need to be a bunch of middle-class white professors who are the intermediaries and custodians and owners of all of that stuff, in this very much the same way that Europe, to its credit at the time really, kind of co-opted a lot of scholarship coming from the Arab world. They co-opted the Islamic bathing practices, they took the Indian decimal number system and they went, this shit is blatantly good. We may not like these people, but the stuff they're doing is blatantly good and could improve our life. And so we're going to take all of that stuff and run with it. There was a whole process called the Toledo translations in Andalusia and Spain, where classical Greco-Roman scholarship was translated into Latin, but from Arabic.
Yeah, I mean, they were Arabic-speaking scholars who were doing it.
Exactly.
The thing that I think was so special about Fire in the Booth wasn't only the lyricism and the lyrical prowess and sort of almost like the athletic achievement of it, but the subject matter was decidedly from a UK perspective, decidedly from somebody who grew up at the metropole of an empire that was trying to understand the impact of colonialism by the people in their neighborhood. And you weren't hearing that from New York or from Chicago or from LA or stuff like that. You were hearing a different story that rhymed, but not that story. Did you feel like, I need to tell this story, this is a story that needs to be told?
Yeah, definitely. Very, very consciously, I feel like when you buy a Nas record or a Rakim record or a Kendrick Lamar record, you're buying a slice of Black American history. When you buy a Kendrick Lamar record, you know it's harking back to George Clinton and to this. And even if you don't know, it's in there.
Yeah.
With Nas, his dad was a jazz musician, right? So it's that direct. Rakim is a grade 8 saxophone player. This is not like, and when you hear him talking about how he tried to rap, he's like, I was trying to rap the way John Coltrane plays.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard him say that with my own. So there's this, even though the mainstream media tries to denigrate hip hop as an art form, there is this canon and this history and so on.
Continuity.
This continuity. With us in the UK, it's a little bit different because our influences are twin, where we've got the American bigger cousin in one ear, and then we've got the Jamaican bigger cousin in the other ear. Because as much as I grew up on Nas and New York hip hop, especially West Coast too, but really New York hip hop, I had Bounty Killer and Beanie Man and Shabba and Ninja Man and Supercat in my other ear with the Jamaican vibe, and those sort of two avenues gave us UK hip hop and grime, gave us jungle and then the UK variant of garage, because Jamaica was always in the back here going, yeah, but I'm here too, and so I feel like, for me, I always say to people, Bounty Killer especially was as much of an influence on me in the early 90s as Nas was. He was the other MC that I looked at and had political commentary and had great songs and so on and had cultural impact. And so, like any group of people, you want to tell your story and your people's story and their experiences. And I think hip hop, as Chuck D always put it, being the CNN of the hood, I feel like we always wanted to say to our cousins in New York, look, we can relate, not just like as a gimmick because of the music, but we have some very different experiences, but some similar experiences too. And I feel like, Fire in the Booth was partly trying to achieve that. And I think partly did, where people went, oh, you have the same problems with mass incarceration and institutionalized racism and police brutality. But then there's some differences. And that's what it was trying to get at.
After the success of the earlier part of your career, you established yourself as like a real voice that's trying to tap into this story. And with that success comes access to different places. You're traveling around the world, you're meeting all these different types of people. And And I would imagine that your vantage point changes and evolves. So I want to talk a little bit about that South-South solidarity, especially at a moment like this right now. I really feel like we're hitting some sort of pivot point where the nature of empire is like the Wizard of Oz curtain has fallen a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this moment of asking ourselves, like, do we have to keep on going through the center of the empire? Can we do South-South collaborations? Can we support each other? I'm curious, from somebody who's traveled as much as you have and have thought about this thought about empire as much as you have, what is the nature of how you think about that South-South?
Yeah, I think we can, we will, and we are. I also think all of the same contradictions that come out with human politics will come out. There will be South-South conflict and South-South collaboration, right?
Yeah.
Humans will never, I don't believe we're going to build a bed of roses where we all get on. But I do hope for a world where there's less war and more peace, where everyone has access to the basics of life, clean running water, healthcare, education, a decent home to live in, more time with their family. Like, I think one of the things that happens is not just more access, which does happen, class privilege, which does happen if you achieve certain things, but there's also just age. And I think at a certain point you realize you have a bit more of a tragic view, at least I have. And the reason for that is, no, but the reason for that isn't anything grand or political. When you realize just maintaining cordial relations with your 10 closest family members is a task worthy of the Buddha. And even the Buddha might fail, right? But you don't know that when you're 22, because you still get on with everybody. Then between 22 and 32, siblings fall out, cousins fall out, aunties and uncles don't get on, granny dies, and one person in the family tries to thief the money and blah, 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 and so on, right? I don't want to tell too much of my family story, but, you know, I'm sure
all hypothetical.
Listen, all hypothetical. Absolutely not naming anyone. Allegedly. But listen, everybody laughed, and that let me know everyone's family has some...
Everyone has that auntie. Everyone has that uncle.
Everyone's got problems. And what I realized, see, when I was young, I was poor. I don't know why I'm doing poor in inverted commas. I was poor, right? I went to school without breakfast. Times was hard. Sleeping in a tracksuit. All of that stuff, right? I thought middle-class families had all the answers and their life was so wonderful, right? Because compared to me, on paper, that seemed... Then I became an adult and I realized that one's mum takes heroin in front of the kids. And that one does this. And that one's absent. And that's why that girl was the one having drug and other parties at her house at 13, right? So I realized class doesn't... Don't get me wrong, you'd rather cry on a Benz than in a bicycle. But that material concerns only solve one part. You need community, you need family, you need people that love you and care about you. And often, sometimes poorer communities and poorer countries have more of that than places that have more economic privilege. I mean, America and Britain would be two great examples of that. Very rich countries, a palpable lack of community compared to many other places, because the way capitalism is organized in those two countries specifically, communities are constantly eviscerated, moving around the country, housing's completely unaffordable, institutions, religious and community institutions find it harder to maintain themselves, and so on and so forth. And so I think that the change in vantage point from traveling, little things. I was in North Africa, right? And I noticed that Korean, this is long before K-pop. This is like 12, 13 years ago. When I say long before K-pop, I mean long before K-pop was on my radar, right? K-pop was clearly happening in Korea, right? But I noticed that the Korean government had an active program of translating their soaps and their TV shows into Darija, the Moroccan and Algerian variants of Arabic. Not even just Arabic general, the local version, right? As part of their soft power play to sell car. And I was like, that's phenomenal. Like, and you think of even today, even in the West, you've had Korean TV shows be successful. You've had Italian TV shows be successful, which sounds, even because Italy's part of the West, but Italy's treated as like...
We were talking about this morning. Yeah.
It's like the baby cousin. It's the Naples of the West. It's the hood. Like, it's like, you're just about in the G8, but we all know if you weren't a white country, you wouldn't be in the G8 no more. You'd be in some other thing.
You're about as south as you can get.
Right. But even economically, like Italy is a rich country, but A
Yeah.
small rich country.
Yeah.
And the south of Italy is not rich, right?
Yeah, Sicily is a different thing.
Right. And so I feel like if Italy was in North Africa, they'd go, yeah, G8's not for you. How is Italy in the G8 and India's not? Like, it's absurd when you really think about it. It's a country that represents a fifth of humanity. There's a nuclear power. There's a 5,000-year-old civilization. And Italy's also got a very impressive history of civilization. It's at what point does India go, excuse me, we're also a democracy, you know?
Or screw the G8.
Or screw the G8 and BRICS,
Yeah.
right? Either course is fine. I'm just saying it's.
I think they made their decision, by the way.
I think they clearly have made their
yeah, I
decision.
think they have.
And I think if post World War II, if Western governments hadn't been so short-sighted,
Yeah.
in my view, you think about the absurdity of excluding Indian troops from the victory parade after World War II. India contributed more men and resources than New Zealand, Canada, and Australia combined to the British war effort. And the British government goes, yeah, but do we really want to show the world that brown people helped us win this war? Yeah, no. And I think they thought that relationship was going to continue of just being able to tell these massive countries what to do forever and ever into the future. If they had have said, which they did with Poland, so for example, after World War II, the British government had loads of immigrants coming from Poland that the British government was subsidizing, and they actively had a propaganda campaign called What the Polish Did for You, where they started putting leaflets through people's letterbox saying, look, we know these people from Poland are coming here and you Brits, white Brits don't love them, but this is why they have a right to be here. Can you imagine they did that with people from India and the Caribbean and Africa? The whole history of post-war Britain could have been different, but also their relationship to the state of India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Nigeria and all these other large economies, even if they're per capita terms poor countries, these are going to be massive economies in the future. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
I feel like that arrogance in that period made a lot of the leaders of the countries go, what? Really? Okay. And now, you know, I listen to the Indian foreign minister talk quite a lot, and I look at the way he speaks with a certain confidence. Like, listen, we're not your local cousin, you know, brother. It's not 1942. Like, we're not some new kid on the block you can just tell what to do. We've been around for a minute.
Yeah.
And you need to respect us.
Yeah.
And that sort of world that's emerging, that multipolar world, which, by the way, prior to 1500 was the world. Europe
Yeah,
didn't
that
go-
is the nature. That is the natural order. The natural order is a multipolar, multiplayer chess game.
Absolutely. And when Europe went out into the world, this is what's interesting. For European colonialism and white supremacy to justify themselves, Europeans have had to lie to themselves about their own history. When they first went out around the world, whether it was Marco Polo or the early Portuguese in West Africa, they went, wow, these non-Europeans are doing some pretty impressive stuff. It was only after they got the machine gun and quinine, which helped Europeans to survive malaria and conquered everybody, they went, these people are rubbish. Before that, they were like, no, man, these people are on stuff. They got this, they got that, we could learn this, we could learn that. It was the arrogance of finally having conquered everybody that made them go, we've always been the best. But prior to that, they were like, they had to, of necessity, negotiate those relationships. We're now returning to a world in which the West is going to have to negotiate those relationships. Some people don't want that world to emerge, and how vicious the kickback will be is going to determine whether or not we have World War III, I think.
Yeah. What is it like in Europe right now, from your perspective? I mean, like, we're sitting here in Dubai right now.
Yeah.
We're in this moment of transition. Do you feel like people on the ground there are, from your perspective, you travel a lot, from your perspective, are people reconciling that that contradiction and saying, okay, wait a second, we need to renegotiate our relationship to the rest of the world?
I think some people are, but I'm also conscious that I have a bubble, an ideological bubble, and I try
Sure.
not to, of people who think similarly, are reasonably well educated, are quite worldly. I think there's also a portion, I mean, if you look at the Brexit, Farage,
Yeah.
Tommy Robinson of it all, there's definitely a pushback against that. And there are a portion of Brits who genuinely don't realize that the whole north of England is not a rich country anymore. Like, it's a middle income country at best. Like London, one of the biggest problems in England is regional inequality. You got one major city that's responsible for like a quarter of the country's GDP. Outside of that, you're talking about a living standard similar to Slovenia. No disrespect to Slovenia, because Slovenia is not a poor. No, I'm being literal. Like, literally, the per capita income in England outside of London is about the same as Slovenia. Yet Brits have this arrogance, like as if we're Singapore or Switzerland or somewhere. And like, I have people message me all the time about shithole countries and stuff like that. And I think, bro, like, If anything, the average working Brit today, with the cost of living crisis, with the unaffordability of housing, should be relating to people in the global south and saying, rah, like, my parents work hard and they're never gonna own a home.
Yeah.
I now get how economics beyond my control can shape my experience. If anything, you'd think the decline in living standards in the West would make Westerners go, rah, like, so if other people are suffering, it isn't just because they're stupid and backwards and their culture's awful. Because if you're a firefighter or a school teacher or a nurse in England today, you're doing the same work you were doing 20 years ago, the same necessary and important work, and you're receiving half the reward for it because your wages are frozen below the rate of inflation, because houses are like 8 times the price of what they were, and because basic necessities are expensive. You haven't changed your behavior. And so I think some people are having that self-reflection, but I do think it's hard for a lot of people to let go of those. Once you've been told you're superior, there is something rotten in the human spirit, and I'm not even saying I'm above it. I had a particular type of upbringing. Had I grown up a light-skinned person in Jamaica, where being light-skinned is a source of privilege and you're treated differently, as if your white daddy must be somebody powerful, even if he wasn't, right? There's a whole history of colorism in the Caribbean that is very different to being a mixed-race road in London. I might have had some of that arrogance, because I deal with light-skinned Jamaicans, and many of them do have it, right? Because they've grown up being treated a certain way simply because their skin is lighter, and it means something different socially, and they're a separate social class. There does seem to be something rotten in us that when we get somebody to look down on, it's very hard to go, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
That person isn't worse than me. And I think a lot of us find it very, very hard to admit that our success in life, even if we work very hard, me included, by the way, is hugely related to luck. I grew up in a social housing in Zone 2 in the middle of one of the wealthiest cities in the world. A kid who lived in Middlesbrough didn't do anything differently to my family. Yeah. He just lived in Middlesbrough and I lived in London. A child born in the same day in the favelas in Brazil, even though I was unfortunate in a rich country, I was also extremely lucky globally. And I think lots of people seem to find it really hard to go, yeah, I'm successful, but luck played a big, and privilege in a way.
Yeah. Everybody give it up for Akala.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.